Okay, light meters. Now, every camera, well, yeah, every camera pretty much these days has a light meter built in, and they're incredibly sensitive, and they have multiple modes, and they have all kinds of abilities to know that you're photographing a landscape and the sky shouldn't be, too bright, and spot metering and center weighted metering and all that kind of stuff, and that's really handy. Except that way back when, you had an opportunity to meter your light with something like this, which is it's in great shape. This is I love industrial design from, I guess, 1950s. This is a Sekonic Light Meter, and made by the Seiko Electronic Company of Japan. So I guess when they weren't making wristwatches, yeah, Seiko Electronic Company, when they weren't making wristwatches, they were making light meters. And this is this is your plain Jane, as simple as it gets, selenium cell light meter. So how it works is that it just measures the light coming in. And on the front here, you've got a little door, and there's a little red dot there, and then there's a closed sign on the front of the meter. And that is for bright light. So if you're out in bright daylight, you have the meter closed so that the selenium cell that's in there doesn't get overwhelmed. If you're inside, like we are today, you hit the little button, spring-loaded, and it opens the door, and then you have a blue window pointing at you, and then you have a blue spot that says open. And the selenium cell, for whatever reason, I'm not sure exactly what the science is on it, but it generates a little tiny bit of electricity, just enough to move a needle to give you a reading. And in this case, sitting here with the north light flowing in, the little red needle is between 5.6 and 6.3, which I guess is 5.6 and 5.6 and a half or so. And you have two wheels on the front of the meter, one of which is where you can actually, there's a little spot where you can get your thumbnail, and you can move it to set your ASA or your ISO speed. And in fact, actually, this one goes from, what are we here, down 6 ISO is at the bottom, and at the top is 800. So anyway, so you arbitrarily set it for 100, just like that. And then you look at the meter, and it's between 5.6 and 6.3. And so on the other, there's an inner wheel and an outer wheel. The outer wheel just basically has a whole bunch of f-stops. And if you set it between 5.6 and 6.3, then the inner wheel has a bunch of shutter speeds, and all you have to do is just line up your shutter speeds and your aperture. So if you want to shoot at f11, you need to shoot at a 30th. If you want to shoot at f2, you're shooting at 1/1000th. And that is all there is to it. And but it's short of the Sunny 16 rule, which for those of you who don't know, it's in bright light, it's 1 over the ISO of your film at f16, which has been for me a lifesaver a couple times. But short of that, these little meters, as simple as they are, for decades, were totally indispensable. And my Leica M2 doesn't have a meter. My Hasselblad, well, one of them anyway, doesn't have a meter. The Pentax 6.7 that I have has a meter, which is actually surprisingly good, but it can get fooled, and it's always nice to be able to take have a handheld meter that you can get another opinion on. So there are a number of cameras, especially old ones, that really benefit from meters like this, and they're cheap like borscht. You can buy them on eBay, and as long as they work, they work. They work really well, as far as I can tell. In fact, actually, I'm going to grab my digital light meter, and we're going to see just how close it is. One moment. All right, Flash Meter 4. When I was a kid, back when I started doing photography, this was like the meter to have, and then nobody wanted them, and I picked it up for a couple $100. And now actually they're getting quite expensive. So we need to set this meter to 100 ISO. There we go. Okay, and it's safe to assume that the light coming from out there is going to be the same for either of these. So if I go to Lucy, it's okay. Right. So ambient reading on this gives me 1.4 at a 60th. It's interesting. Okay, and here it gives me, I'm way off, f8. Okay, ISO 100, ISO 100. Well, that's embarrassing. Well, two possibilities. One is I don't understand what I'm doing with this meter. And another possibility is that it isn't reading correctly. Well, now what do you do? Okay, so don't need those right now. So, as always, don't you hate it when the camera's rolling when you end up doing something that surprises you? So, okay, I don't really want to get into this because I don't honestly really understand it that well, but there's two types of metering light. There's incident and there's reflective. And honestly, I don't know if this is an incident meter or a reflective meter. This is an incident meter. That's because it's got that white dome on top of it, and you're supposed to point it towards the light source. So the easiest way to solve this, to educate myself about what kind of a meter this is and just how accurate it is we'll just, go over to the window and set up something and grab a camera and expose for this setting and expose for this setting and see what we get. Let's give it a try. Then we'll have to solve this, have to have a shootout here. Okay, so we've got both meters and I've got a camera. And camera set to manual. And I'm going to ignore metering suggestions from the camera. So first up, the Sekonic. It's so bright here that we have to have the little door closed. But it gives me a reading here of between 1.4 and 2. So if I go to closed and I go between 1.4 and 2, it tells me that I'm at 60th, 125th at f8, which I'm fairly confident is going to be really dark, but f8, 125th. All right, let's give this a try. Now, remembering, of course, that it's just for the highlight is what we're exposing for here. So we'll have to see how the things work out. Yeah, it's pretty dark. All right, and then the flash meter 4 gives me f2.8.5. Actually, here, if I go 1/20th, f2 at a 1/20th, which also sounds actually sounds wrong going the other way. But let's just try that. f2.5. There we go. All right, and yeah, not bad actually. I think the Sekonic might be showing its age. So anyway, what can I say? First of all, well, there's a few things. The Sekonic is infinitely more attractive than the Minolta. If I want to look good with a camera, well, if I want to look good with a camera around my neck, I don't have this, but if I want to have a good-looking piece of equipment, that any day is more attractive than that. And the other piece of advice that comes out of this is, as always, for the love of God, check your equipment before you walk out and take photographs of something that's really important, because that's the sort of thing where you blaze through a roll of film or several rolls of film and you end up underexposing everything by 4 stops or whatever the amount is. And I shudder to think, actually, over the years, the number of times where I've had pieces of equipment do things that don't appear to be right. You look and you go, oh, that's not quite right. But, well, whatever, you just kind of keep going. And it turned out that, in fact, they weren't working properly, and I messed up. And thankfully, it hasn't been anything too critical. But certainly in that situation, I mean, all I can think is that the selenium cell in this meter after 50 or 60 years is just not putting out enough energy to get that needle where it needs to go. And as a consequence, it's underexposing things, or maybe the opposite, not quite sure. Anyway, whatever. It's not working properly. Probably a dangerous thing to have around. I'm sure you could probably actually come up pretty quickly with a solution in terms of having exactly the right, you know that when you turn it here, then you need to add 3 stops. But that's always kind of a dangerous way to use a piece of equipment, especially one that's supposed to give you the right answer. So on that note, it is a funky little meter, kind of fun to have around, but probably best left on the shelf to enjoy from afar. So there you have it.